Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Butta Fast. I am Ahmad Naqvi. With me is Usman Samiuddin. And so far in our series, हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हैं पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट में पेस बॉलिंग की अपनी पसंदीदा स्पेल्स. अभी तक हमने जो भी स्पेल्स चुनी है, आई थिंक ऑलमोस्ट सारी ऐसी हैं कि आपने अगर लाइव नहीं देखी हो तो आपने उनके बारे में सुना है, आपने यूट्यूब पे देखा है. This might be the most niche one that we've done so far. Usman, can you talk about like हमने क्यों चुनी spell और कौन सी spell है ये?
Yeah, so, I mean, in a way, we had to, of course, pick a Waqar spell, right? Waqar Younis, like, not being on the Butterfast podcast would be like, I don't know, Egypt without the pyramids or something, right? It's that kind of thing that you cannot have a podcast purely on Pakistani fast bowling without Waqar Younis there. So the problem,
A
I think,
Pakistani
initially,
podcast, a Pakistani podcast on pace bowling without Waqar is like a PCB video on cricket history without Imran Khan.
to use to use a much better analogy, yes. It is exactly the same thing. Or one which they put Imran back in but leave Waseem Akram out. It's kind of
Yeah.
similar. It's doing that kind of thing. So the issue, and we were discussing this, right? We were like, after we did the last podcast, we were kind of thinking that ab kis pe kare, kya kare, and Waqar was an obvious one. But then we were both kind of thinking that Waqar ke itne sare spells hain. Like, what do we do? Waqar had such devastating spells, especially in that first 4 or 5 years of his career, that it was difficult to pick one. But ultimately, we picked this one against South Africa in, like, it was early 90s ODI try series, probably fixed to the max. I think इसी series में finals में जाके, नहीं इस series में नहीं, अगली series में एक साल बाद जो हुई थी उसमें finals में जाके कुरान पे हाथ रख के लोग ने कसम खाई थी कि नहीं हमने ये मैच फिक्स नहीं करा है और ये सब हो रहा था. But we were very much veering towards that time. So it was total chaos. And this match comes up. It's a try series in South Africa. South Africa are, like, recently back from apartheid ban, and they're like already like a really proficient, efficient team full of all-rounders from like 1 to 11. सबकी बैटिंग है, सबकी बॉलिंग है, सब कुछ कर सकते हैं. जॉन्टी रोड्स भी है. और पाकिस्तान वही अपने स्टाइल में वसीम अकरम की कप्तानी के आखिरी दिन है. और Pakistan, I think they bat and they make like 207, which is a really bad score. But I remember the score because my legend hero, our bro Asif Mustafa, top scores in the game. Okay, and Asif Mustafa has a massive role to play in this game all the way through. So Pakistan scored 207. South Africa need 208 to win, which, like, they have 150 million all-rounders in their side. They're going to win it really easily. They're going at, I believe, 159 for one, needing 50 off 10, with like 9 wickets in hand. And Tony Cozier is on commentary, and he says that's an equation which virtually says South Africa have won the match, right? Even later, they're 165 for 2 after 42 overs, and Umar Qureshi is saying, oh, that's a really disappointing batting effort from Umar Qureshi, by the way, on TV commentary, saying it's a really disappointing batting failure by Pakistan, basically, to only get 207. और फिर लो जी कोई आधे घंटे पौन घंटे बाद साउथ अफ्रीका पड़े हुए हैं जमीन पे, वो स्टार शेप में ऐसे गिरे हुए हैं, उनकी आंखें काली हो गई हैं, नाक से खून निकल रहा है, दांत 2-3 टूट गए हैं. वकार यूनुस ने ऐसी तबाही फैला दी है कि पाकिस्तान have won by, I think they won by 10 runs in the end, and the collapse is like an epic collapse. And so, of all the wins that Waqar and Pakistan pulled off in that era, I just feel like this is the most illustrative of the impact of Waqar. That he came in, and at that time एक feeling थी वकार के बारे में. और अहमद, आप बहुत जवान हैं, आपको शायद याद ना हो जो पहली फीलिंग थी वकार की, बट एक उस जमाने में फीलिंग होती थी कि जब तक वकार ने अपना कार्ड नहीं प्ले करा ना एक मैच में, तब तक पाकिस्तान हारा नहीं है. Literally, it was until Waqar Younis has had his say, this match is not over. And I feel like this match, I remember watching, and I remember thinking that, yeah, ये scene Waqar Younis का, and I felt it, in my mind, this is blasphemy, that I felt it even more than I ever felt it for Waseem. उस जमाने में कि जब तक वकार ने आके अपना काम नहीं दिखाया हो ना, तो ये मैच पाकिस्तान के हाथ से बाहर नहीं है. And this match, I think, illustrates that absolutely perfectly. Like, the bare facts are that he ended with 5 for 25, but like those are just the bare facts. Like beyond that was much, 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 much more.
So I just want to clarify something. um, क्योंकि इस पॉडकास्ट में मेरा जो बायस है वकार के खिलाफ एज अ वसीम अकरम फैन वो काफी दफा दिखाई देगा एंड द फैक्ट दैट लाइक आई एम क्रूशली a few years younger and I don't remember much of the early years of Waqar. But two things that I want to एक pro एक con. तो उस्मान is saying कि हम लोग सोच रहे थे इतनी सारी spells हैं which one do we choose? I was actually thinking there's no there isn't a memorable Waqar spell. मतलब वकार की कौन सी ये performance है जो आप फौरन कहते हैं कि
Astaghfirullah.
oh yeah that one.
Astaghfirullah.
I'm sorry to say but like you know कि उसकी उसकी ना ही किसी वर्ल्ड कप में मशहूर स्पेल है ना ही किसी इंडिया के खिलाफ कोई ऐसी काइंड ऑफ मतलब मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि उसने बॉलिंग अच्छी नहीं कराई या उसमें एडवांस एनालिटिक्स नहीं दिखा रहे कि उसने कितना जबरदस्त किया है व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज कि जो नैरेटिव जिससे बनता है कि वो कलकत्ता में दो बॉलों में दो विकेटें ले ली या द्राविड को ऐसे
CG
आउट
पे.
दो दफा आउट
हाँ.
किया या फलाना ढिकाना व्हाटएवर यू वांट टू डू या वकार जस्ट डजंट हैव दैट सो दैट वाज वन थिंग और दूसरी चीज ये थी कि एक स्टोरी में बताना चाहा था क्योंकि वाइल दिस इज ट्रू कि ठीक है कोई मैच में मुझे नहीं याद पड़ता और अगेन जैसा कि मैंने स्टैब्लिश कर दिया है कि लाइक I'm like 8, 9 years old when we win the 92 World Cup. That's really when I'm following cricket. So I've already missed like that crazy run of Waqar's before the stress fractures come into play. मगर उसके बावजूद भी, as much as I was a Waseem Akram fan, वकार यूनिस का एक एस्थेटिक इम्पैक्ट बहुत बड़ा था और अभी हम इसकी स्पेल पे आएंगे बट आई जस्ट वांट टू सेट दिस अप सो दैट वी गेट देयर क्योंकि while again मुझे वसीम अकरम ज्यादा पसंद था वसीम अकरम के जो हेयर स्टाइल है हैज probably a bigger impact on South Asia than anyone else in the 90s. That being
100%.
said, कि Waqar Younis was more of the archetype of what the rock star fast bowler is supposed to look like. और क्लास 4 में मेरे चाचू हैं असफर नाम है मैंने बाबू चाचू कहते हैं बाबू चाचू अमेरिका से आ रहे थे पाकिस्तान ठीक है और उस वक्त उस दिन सुबह के वक्त उनकी फ्लाइट लैंड हो रही थी और उस दिन हमारे यहाँ स्पोर्ट्स पीरियड होता था तो हमारा थोड़ा स्कूल एक्स्ट्रा था तो इंस्टेड ऑफ जस्ट सफेद जूते आप पूरा एक यूनिफॉर्म ही बदल जाता था व्हिच इज लाइक अ वाइट शर्ट एंड लाइक अ बैगी वाइट पैंट मेरे दिमाग में दिस इज लाइक टेस्ट क्रिकेटर के कपड़े और फिर जो है मेरे पास चेन तो थी नहीं तो मैं तावीज अपनी ना वो शर्ट से
Ah,
बाहर निकाल के
ah,
एंड
oof.
हाथों पे हेड वो आर्म रिस्ट बैंड्स right
Wristbands.
so I'm going to school thinking like not only am I looking like Waqar like I'm looking like a badass and my chachu sees me like a chubby little kid in like these flowing white tracks and like a small white t-shirt and taweez coming out and he's like भाईजान आप इसे मदरसा भेज रहे हैं ये तो मौलवी बन रहा है and I was just like no I was like I'm not trying to be a Maulvi. I'm trying to be a rock star. Obviously, and I feel like I look back at it and I was so hurt by that. And I think about like who I was trying to emulate. It was Waqar Younis. And in this match, about highlights, taking it to Waqar, just incredibly sexy. His
Huh.
bouffant hair is working great. He's always got the chain that's going to be flying in. He before Shoaib Akhtar kind of almost becomes a caricature of a fast bowler's run up, but like Waqar is when you imagine a fast bowler, you imagine Waqar, like for me, like Waqar or Stain, like a really kind of typical fast bowler.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and with that vibe, and it's kind of amazing because up was, you see West Indian cricketers and Waseem and Waqar are and I've spoken to West Indians as well, and very famously, Usain Bolt was a Pakistan fan because he was such a fan of Waqar Younis.
Hmm.
So it's kind of crazy to see that like there's like Caribbean who think that Pakistanis
Some
are
standard
cool and
was.
supposed to be like them. Yeah, and I think तो एक तरफ जहां मैं ये बात कर रहा हूँ कि हाँ वकार की कोई मेमोरेबल स्पेल नहीं है आई डोंट वांट टू अंडरमाइन फ्रॉम हिज स्टेटस बिकॉज दैट्स doesn't detract from just how fucking cool Waqar Younis was. Like if Usain Bolt is saying, "Yo, I'm going to give up supporting my own team because I think this guy is so cool. It's not like Bill Gates or someone boring saying it. It's Usain Bolt.
It's Usain Bolt.
Like,
Literally,
uh,
literally like the greatest athlete of the last century or whatever.
yeah. And so the greatest and coolest. And he thinks like Waqar is the thing. So I feel that really plays into this. So and even when I watch these highlights again, and it's crazy क्योंकि ये fixing की बात हो रही है. साउथ अफ्रीका ने हमें वर्ल्ड कप में हराया था और उसके बाद इस ट्राई सीरीज में या तो फिक्सिंग थी या इट वाज मैजिक. वेस्ट इंडीज kept beating Pakistan.
Yeah,
South Africa kept beating West Indies,
and
and
Pakistan.
Pakistan kept beating South Africa. And Pakistan at one point was dismissed for the lowest total.
Yes.
43 पे ऑल आउट कर दिया था.
Uh-huh.
वकार ने पहली बॉल पे आउट किया था हेन्स को. लाइक ओ शिट और लाइक
इसको भी बचा लेगा.
yeah. So I do remember that feeling definitely with both those वसीम और वकार के. मतलब ये किसी को भी किसी भी टोटल पे आउट कर सकते हैं जो हो या ना हो. पर जब आप ऐसा मैच देखते हैं जिसमें सिर्फ 50 रन चाहिए 20 रन चाहिए और ये पूरी विकेट उड़ा लेते हैं, that's why you're thinking like this. And so let's get to the spell because um, we'll discuss the wickets and then we'll discuss the impact it had on your writing as well. मगर जिस पॉइंट पे वकार आता है, both the commentators have said कि ये मैच खत्म हो चुका है, साउथ अफ्रीका जीत जाएगा. um, and then Waqar gets Hudson out. Hudson is batting on 93. Usman, I feel you should describe that delivery.
Can I also say that again? You are overlooking the vital contribution of Asif Mustafa, who bowls one of the Kirstens with a. You know why? Like, so it is funny, obviously, because of my obsession with Asif Mustafa and like the Bihari biradri that we all are or whatever. But I remember it because even Waqar remembered it. When I spoke to Waqar about this spell, he was like कि जब आसिफ भाई ने गैरी कर्स्टन को आउट करा था ना, उसके बाद से मुझे लगा कि यार इस मैच में कुछ है, हम लोग कुछ कर सकते हैं. And he says that I ran up to the where the huddle was for the wicket and I was like यार ये मैच हमारे हाथ में है. उस दूसरे एंड से थोड़ी सी वसीम आई थिंक बॉल रिवर्स, he had found a bit of reverse and Waqar sniffed and he was like कि बस अब मुझे मालूम है. So that ball he bowls to Hudson, this guy's on like 93, right? And I think like it's a pathetic strike rate, but of course it's a decent strike rate for that era. He's like faced 140 balls by that stage, something like that. For somebody like him, who's that well set, and for Waqar to be coming in and he does like this is I think that first delivery is like that first wicket is the classic Waqar Yorker. Like when you die, that is the Waqar Yorker that you will remember, not like the one that he gets Cronje with later. This is like the classic one in that there's a little bit of illusion in that the ball with the arm, because he was so slingy, it first looks like it's going out a little bit and then it kind of it goes and then it comes like this and it dips in. And the shot that he's playing, I think one of the commentators says that that's like a really bad shot, it's a really loose shot and stuff. It's not. Like I think the length was on for that shot to be played. He tries driving him, the length was on, like he was probably thinking that this is an easy pitch, I can do this. But it goes in at the last second, of course, and that curve is such a Waqar curve. Maths mein aap wo Bayesian curve hota hai probability ka, or you name it after the scientist. Like this reverse swinging, I think like you call it the Waqar curve because I don't think I've seen anybody quite swerve the ball in the way that he did. And then the celebration and stuff afterwards. Like I just wanted to touch up on your point about the aesthetics of Waqar. एक मुझे तस्वीर याद है वकार की जो I'll upload it later. Whenever we put this out, I'll put that picture up. It's of him sitting. एक किताब है वसीम और वकार के बारे में, दोनों के बारे में, like this quickie book that was published and written by an English author, right back in the day after the 92 series. उसमें वकार टॉपलेस बैठा हुआ है and he's getting stretched, like उसके पीछे कोई फिजियो खड़ा हुआ stretch कर रहा है. And my God, dude, like एक naturally athletic body अगर आप देखें ना, with not a millimeter of fat on it. Usually आप अगर ऐसे बैठते हैं तो हमारी, I don't know about you, but थोड़ी सी तोन आगे निकल रही होती है, mushroom
You know
top.
about me. You know that about me.
So, but Waqar is like fatless. And this is back in like 1991, 92, yeah. So it's not even like training, so it had this pristine masculinity about him, which Waseem didn't have. Waseem's body, I always felt like, unless he worked really hard at it, it verged on kind of uncle type subcontinent body. Ho jati. He had a different kind of shape anyway. But Waqar was like pristine, athletic, and when he celebrates, you see him in like you see Waqar and you see, Acha, yeah, this was what the fuss was about. I think even now, like people who haven't seen him at his peak, they watch that wicket and they see him and the next couple of wickets and they see him celebrating. They'll understand immediately the point that you're raising about, like, he was such a physical presence in those days. And it's, I don't know, maybe like, he must have been intimidating for guys. Like, I remember reading an article about him when he was at Surrey, and he went crazy at Surrey in his first season, took lots of wickets. And people were like, batters were like, yeah, we knew that he wasn't going to hit you with a bouncer, but like the fear of Waqar was exactly the same as facing up to like those really famed West Indian fast bowlers. Like, ek uski itni aggressive masculinity thi that you couldn't like you. That was part of the trick, you know. And I think Waqar did it like very, very naturally.
I feel one of those things, क्या कहते हैं जो वकार की अभी हम बात करें ना कर्व की, सो एंड सो हटसन एज ही सेड इज लाइक इज 93 ऑफ 141 बॉल्स, तो एक ऐसा नहीं है कि वो हर बॉल पे अंधाधुन लप्पे मार रहा है और ना ही कोई आस्किंग रेट ज्यादा है। तो जब हटसन ये कवर ड्राइव खेलना शुरू करता है तो आपको पता है कि ये मतलब इसको लग रहा है कि ये बॉल एज यू सेड लाइक द शॉट इज ऑन राइट,
No.
क्योंकि बॉल उसके हाथ से निकलते इस तरफ जाती है एंड देन दैट इनक्रेडिबल beautiful curve back comes in. But एक चीज ये भी है कि especially after 2005 when reverse swing became more and more common, और अब मतलब कि दुनिया में कोई भी टीम अगर कर रही है तो इतनी सरप्राइज की बात नहीं है। उस वक्त ना ही सिर्फ रिवर्स स्विंग अनकॉमन थी, obviously that book that came out was partly because of the notoriety that reverse swing had caused with both bowlers. um, तो वो उस वक्त आप पहली दफा ये देख रहे थे और मतलब कि रिवर्स स्विंग की बात ही यही है कि इट्स नॉट ओनली गोइंग कि वो शाइन जिस तरफ है वो दूसरी तरफ जा रहा है, मगर वो काफी हाई स्पीड पे और काफी लेट होता है, एंड दैट मेक्स, बिकॉज इट्स नॉट जस्ट वकार बीटिंग हडसन, द बॉल देन हैज इनफ टाइम टू बाउंस अप एंड हिट द विकेट्स एट एन एंगल कि फिर विकेटें उड़ती हुई पीछे जा रही हैं, विच अल्टीमेटली इज व्हाट getting both those things is a lot harder than you think, because first you have to get the ball going one way कि बैटर जो है वो गलत शॉट खेलने लगे, देयर इज एनफ स्पेस, और फिर बॉल अंदर आए मगर बॉल इतनी फुल ना हो कि वो विकेटों को उस एंगल पे लगे कि बस वो वहीं खड़ी रहे, दे हैव टू ब्लो अप। I feel that was Wakar's superpower as well. Like it is like आप जो uh, देसी फिल्मों में जब वो घूसा मारते हैं तो ट्श्याऊ किस्म की आवाज आती है, like you need that spectacle, and Wakar really excelled at just getting that right every time, which he does in this match. I think सारी विकेटें on their own are just wonderful to watch because the stumps are exploding everywhere.
Yeah, he that's 5 wickets, there's 5 bowls. There's no umpire, there's no nothing. And the I like the Cronje wicket, although my I'm sure some viewers will know my gripe with like the ball hitting the bat and then hitting the stumps, the inside edge or the outside edge onto the stumps, how it takes away from the dismissal. But jo Cronje wala dismissal hai, that is the other Waqar Yorker, and that's the more like regular Yorker that we know, right? Which is he sees Cronje moving, trying to make room on the leg side so that he can go through the offside, which was just becoming a new thing then. And he goes for his toes. It does not swing as much as it's just the angle, and it Cronje kind of outside edges it, and it hits his off stump, and it actually breaks the off stump. Like it actually breaks the off stump. And if you see, I said the Hudson celebration was epic, but this one,
Actually, so this is what I wanted to discuss, क्योंकि एक वही था कि this is an inside edge and I was like, oh, Usman's going to be fun on this topic. मगर जो उसमें बेस्ट बात ये है कि first I'll get to what the celebration is. The celebration का context ये है कि वकार has already provided this crazy delivery. And then Hansi Cronje, and I don't know Hansi Cronje की personality के बारे में और उसकी politics के बारे में ज़्यादा, so I'm just projecting here. But somebody who grew up in apartheid, and he's kind of thinking कि, oh yeah, I'm a superior race, so I can come down the wicket to Waqar fucking Younis and then play him inside out. And so when Waqar bowls him, he has both arms up and he screams into Cronje's face. He runs
runs right
into
into him.
Cronje and looks him in the face, screams at his face, and runs away, being like, "You fucking idiot!" like,
Are you serious?
It's exactly right. And so in that sense, that this is why I was saying that not all inside edges are the same, not all inside edges, because this one, the theatricality of it, मतलब जिस तरीके से फट जाती हैं उसकी stumps,
हाँ.
even though it's off the edge, but he's got to yacht him, and then he follows that up with the celebration कि उसके मुंह पे आके कि भाई तुम्हारा क्या दिमाग खराब है कि तुम मुझे चार्ज कर रहे हो, और चार्ज
Wild-eyed
करके inside out,
celebration.
like are you,
Yeah. Like
like
completely
तुम्हारी
wild-eyed,
औकात क्या
right?
है?
He's completely
Yeah,
wild-eyed. Like
yeah,
Waqar is like exploding.
yeah,
कि ये
yeah,
क्या
yeah.
हो रहा है? And I mean, you're saying that कि Cronje superiority of his race and stuff. I don't know. Like the thing that I reckon is that they hadn't faced Waqar then, right? Because Waqar wasn't at the World Cup. Those were not days of like video analysis and stuff. और उसे इतना नहीं खेला होगा. तो Cronje probably backed himself thinking कि यार मैं हूँ player. ये जो भी हो, Waqar Younis, मैं South African हूँ. So there's a little bit of that, but I think like he genuinely thought that he could take him on. And, he was taught that lesson very quickly that you do not take Waqar Younis on like this. And I think, is it the wicket before this, which is also interesting? Is it the Hudson wicket, which he actually bowls him on the outside? So like that's actually a regular, it's almost like a out swinging delivery that he bowls him with, which is again like you think of Waqar and you think of like especially in those peak days, most bowls that you would think Waqar affecting would be like the reverse swinging Yorker length coming back in, or like going away from the left hander, whatever. But this one, and I'm trying to remember who it is. I think it's Hudson who he gets. Um,
I don't think it's Hudson. Hudson वाली तो अंदर आती है.
it's not Hudson. It's I'm trying to go back to so.
Is it the three tail enders that he gets?
Oh, okay. The Hudson one is the one that comes inside. Yes, you're right. The Hudson one is it? Oh, it's Cullinan. I think. I think it's Shane Warne's bunny. No, no, no. It's Cronje. I'm getting it wrong. But the other wicket basically in this is one that kind of shapes away, which actually like at that time हम लोग जवान होते थे, so everything was like Waqar ने stumps मार दी तो reverse swinging Yorker ही होगी. But you look back at it now with the experience of like having covered matches, having seen a lot more cricket, having read a lot more, having had the game dissected more, it's actually a beautiful delivery because it kind of cuts away a little bit. And all of it, the thing about it all is that all of it is at extreme pace. Like उस जमाने में speed guns नहीं होती थी, but like pace, I think commonly it's said that he, in these spells, he would get to like 90 plus, essentially. And if you think about the stuff that he was doing with the ball, to start doing that at 90 plus, at the back end of an innings, when the pressure is on, target 50 off 10, they say it's not stiff, but I think the world was just learning then that against Pakistan's bowlers, anything over 30 off 10 is going to be a stiff target because the death overs of an innings is when like Pakistan kind of made the game their own. And the wild-eyed celebration thing about it, like I remember speaking to Waqar, and this is, I'll say it now, I guess this is one of the reasons we picked the spell was because when I spoke to Waqar ages ago about the Haal piece and for the book, I asked him to kind of remember, a particularly memorable spell of his, and he remembered this. He said that, I actually don't remember much of what I did on the field anymore. And I was speaking to him maybe like, 20, 25 years after he'd finished his career. And he said that I don't remember much of it, but I remember this game. And I remember this game because I remember the feeling of it. So he remembered, the Asif Mustafa dismissal. He remembered thinking that ab hamari chance hai, ye tamasha hai, uchal jao us pe. Like the merry-go-round or whatever, the fun ride has started, let's jump on it. But the other thing he remembers is that after the game, he had to go see a doctor because his eyes had swollen. And he reckoned that was because मेरी इतनी adrenaline rush हो गई थी उस game में, मुझे इतनी feeling मेरे अंदर से आ रही थी that I couldn't cope with it and my body had to kind of show it in some way. And so his eyes, he reckons either they've gone really red or they had just swollen. And he was briefly worried about what was happening. And so he went to see a doctor and it turned out that it was just like, it was an adrenaline rush or whatever. And it was the result of that. But I think it tells you the kind of, and it's there in that dismissal of Cronje, that it tells you the kind of emotion and adrenaline that was coursing through him at that time, and that he was kind of, not even navigating. He was just letting it go wild. कि यार ये है, इसे पकड़ के बस चलो, chalo, chalo, chalo. And the whole team, and this is why, this is such an illustrative spell of Haal, really, because his momentum, his adrenaline filters through the rest of his team, and it forces South Africa into absolute like chaos, like absolute chaos. And like Emmer, your comedic talents are like, they far exceed mine. That run out, right? The it has to be one of the
I
most
feel,
comic
you
run
know,
out ever.
I was I was going to ask you to read an excerpt from Haal actually, because that is the funniest description possible of it. And while you do that, like basically to set it up, and that was something where I felt was another knock on Waqar, that even in the spell जो हमने चुनी है अभी, उसके अंदर भी actually like the kind of most hilarious and most Pakistani moment in it is not Waqar, and or chalo, hilarious is not the criteria, but like the most Pakistani thing that happens in it is not Waqar's iconic kind of Yorkers, because I feel that is, yes, Pakistan at its best, but like Pakistan at its most Pakistan is that run out. Do you have that quote?
Yeah, I have the extract. I'll read it out, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's this match again. It's the same match. So Pakistan had limped 208 in their innings, and South Africa were cruising. First at 101 for no loss, then with 10 overs to go, when they needed 50 with 9 wickets in hand. Asif Mustafa, of all bowlers, began the collapse, and by the time Rhodes fell, the sixth wicket, the show was in full uncensored flow. Brian McMillan plays and misses at a Waseem Akram delivery. Spooked by the collapse, Rhodes, and this is Jaunty Rhodes we're talking about, Rhodes tries to sneak a single. The wicketkeeper, Rashid Latif, alert to this now, hits the stump with an underarm throw. McMillan is safe, but Rhodes has just arrived at the same end and, defeated, runs on, his fate decided. Akram is run halfway down the pitch and appeals to nobody in particular as the stumps are broken, maybe just celebrating direct hit. Realizing that it isn't a run out, but instead an opportunity for one at the other end, he starts running back. Mujtaba comes jogging in from point. See, Asif Mujtaba is always there. Comes jogging in from point, still aware, picks up the ball and lobs it gently and high to the non-striker's end. There, along with the retreating Akram, are now assembled Mushtaq Ahmed, Salim Malik, and Inzamam ul Haq. They look like the people who congregate around a road accident in the subcontinent within a second of it happening, with nothing to offer but curiosity. Hanji, kya ho raha hai? Mustafa's lob is a little bit high for Akram, who has to leap to get it. As he's backpedaling, his momentum carrying him past the stumps as he grabs the ball. Momentarily, as he turns and finds no stumps in front of him, there is panic. Meanwhile, Malik also tries to catch the ball behind Akram, just to make sure. And as he moves back, he hits the stumps, nearly falling over, and knocks the bails off. More panic. Luckily, little Bushy is at hand, logging everything that is going on. Inzamam, as always, is inert. And Mushi deliriously points Akram to the stumps. Behind you, as if Akram may not recognize the three stumps he's been bowling at for the better part of his life. Akram plucks out a stump and gleefully taps it with the ball, relief, elation, adrenaline, all coiling into one another. Rhodes is halfway back to his hotel by this point, unaware of the mess he's left behind him. that's, yeah,
This is, I
that's,
mean, I feel that I think if you haven't read Usman's article on this, this is just, when reading it, it was beautiful because like पिछले 20 साल से जो मैं क्रिकेट देख रहा था, उसके finally there was somebody who was describing a formula that fit not just the peaks but also these moments of like absolute bullshit, right? Like you had to find something that like threads this together, and it's really amazing that somebody that I was roommates with, I think a year or two after this article came out, then is now part of the Pakistan setup, and now like even the players are being part of Mickey, Bradburn, and Rehan and Chima. Ke
Mhm.
that whole Pakistan way is like a formalized kind of thing, because you have to acknowledge कि Pakistan, and that's what makes Pakistan such a great sports team to watch, is कि ये जो साउथ अफ्रीकन टीम है, इस मैचेस में पाकिस्तान इनको तब भी हराएगा, बट अगले फिर like they'll win like I don't know 30 matches in a row over the next decade against Pakistan, because that was the Pakistan ke, you most of the time if you just follow like a plan and don't panic, then you'll win the match. But as this article makes sure कि Pakistan, if you get caught up in Pakistan's bullshit, which they're always caught up in themselves, then that's your death sentence. और मतलब यहाँ पे कोई जबरदस्त कि एक तरफ मतलब एक ऑल टाइम ग्रेट स्पेल करा है वकार यूनस, और दूसरी तरफ वही, and in fact forget Waqar Younis, like this is why he kind of gets written out of this, because then as you mentioned in the article as well, उसके बाद Waseem does a run out himself which is
Yeah,
just
an
आज
amazing
भी,
run.
it's like coaching manuals में फास्ट बॉलर्स को अपने फॉलो थ्रू में कि किस तरीके से एक ही मोशन में आपने बॉल पिक की और थ्रो की और आउट किया है. It goes that high and low of Pakistan cricket is very important to appreciate. It is not, it's not Oppenheimer, it's Barbie. That's
Maybe it's both. Barbenheimer. It's actually Barbenheimer, right? But and like, just to bring it back to, I guess, Waqar, is that I think it was this was purely like the terrifying impact of Waqar Younis in those days. And like, I think South Africa were feeling it for among the first times in their life. And I said to you when we were discussing this before, I said to you, like, I used to remember Waqar as in those early years, of those earliest years, I used to remember him in the same way I remember now Mike Tyson. Like when Tyson came out, he was like this crazy, like just wheelhousing, roundhousing force of nature, and you've never kind of seen an impact, right? You've never seen anything like boxing was, it's called the sweet science, और आप बड़े एक तमीज से एक दूसरे को मार रहे हैं, ऐसे ऐसे जैब कर रहे हैं, ये कर रहे हैं, हट रहे हैं, ऊपर नीचे हो रहे हैं, फिर एक मारा, and it was beautiful because of the way Muhammad Ali practiced boxing. It was beautiful, but there was एक लिहाज था उसका, एक तमीज थी उस स्पोर्ट में. एंड देन माइक टाइसन केम आउट एंड ही वाज लाइक, screw this crap, I'm just going to punch the crap out of the guy who's in front of me. And no wonder, like, he came up with that beautiful quote which I think is him. It's like
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
has
yeah.
a fight until they get punched in the mouth or whatever. And it was so much like, आप अगर टाइसन की शुरू शुरू की फाइट्स देखें ना, he used to just come out from the bell just like at you. He would not stop until you were down and dead. And it would usually happen very quickly, and he would completely just like, the impact was like, ऐसे आप चलते हुए आ रहे हैं और अचानक से बह चले गए. So Waqar's impact in those early years, in so many spells, in so many, and this is, like I say, like why we've picked this is the most illustrative of it, but in so many spells, really, बड़े तमीज से गेम चल रही है, सब लोग खेल रहे हैं, बड़ा सिविल है एक दूसरे के साथ, जी जी सलाम एलबीडब्ल्यू हाउस दैट अंपायर, नहीं नहीं नहीं, नॉट आउट, नो, अच्छा अच्छा ठीक है चलते हैं. और फिर अचानक से वकार आके, ये सब छोड़ो, बीसीओ एमसीओ, मैं तो स्टंप्स तोड़ रहा हूँ इधर. एंड यूज्ड टू जस्ट wreck you and leave you completely like on the mat. Like how many spells, man? I like the at Leeds in 92, England were 298 for 2, they were 320 all out in like 40 minutes. Just imagine the impact of that. In I was reading in Lords, at Lords in the same series, 197 for 3 to 255 all out, 108 for 2 to 175 all out. This was all just Waqar. And हम लोग आजकल कहते हैं, and I always feel like we force it a little bit because the sport's different, athletes are different. We try to say, okay, oh, Flintoff had this great ability to bend the game to his will. Ben Stokes has this great ability to bend. And every time I feel we say it, we are stretching a little bit. हम लोग थोड़ा सा बना के allowances लेके कि अच्छा उसने सिर्फ 11 ओवर में 3 ही विकेट लिए हैं, मगर he bent the game to his will. बड़ा लंबा स्पेल था. Waqar, he didn't just bend, he broke the game to how he wanted it. And he did it time and time and time again in those early years. Like I don't think there has been anybody like him. And वो चीमा का कौन है प्रोटेजे, क्रिटिक, जो grassroots है, चीमा,
Crick
I
critic, yeah, yeah, yeah.
account, but he's actually not. He's actually like a real guy. And he's very good, by the way. If you're listening, we love you. You are great. But it was his, and it was a great stat that he came out with, right? That the Barnes standard. I think Chima ने उसका screenshot लगाया था. Sydney Barnes के बारे में, who has the पता नहीं 1800s के bowler है England के, who has the craziest figures in the history of cricket. 27 matches, 189 wickets. Except that Waqar, in his first 27 matches, as I'm sorry, Ryan, I think his name is. Yes, it's Ryan. He pointed out that Waqar, in his first 28 matches, had 180 wickets at like an average of 17.66. Imagine, in your first 28 matches, an average of 17.66, 180 wickets. He literally broke games to how he wanted to fix them. Like, आप 150 for 0 हैं, 200 चेस कर रहे हैं ना, मैं आपको फिर भी आपको ये आपकी गेम तोड़ी, ये लो, ये मेरी गेम अब हो गई है. he was that impactful. And like I don't think, like Tyson, I don't think I have ever seen anybody the way Waqar was in the first 4 or 5 years of his career. It was like insane. And I think you came to Waqar probably in an adult kind of way or whatever during the '96 World Cup. Was it around then that you first saw him? Your like first proper
No,
memories
no,
of
no.
seeing?
I mean, as like I definitely saw him throughout. I would
Okay.
say like 91 onwards. But like wait, I was like 9. I was what 8, 7 years old when that happened. So I didn't really have any kind of in depth kind of info about it.
Yeah, yeah. No, but and like the kind of stuff that he would do. So in the I was looking in that 1991 season. Like, check, this is a crazy stat. Like, if you think about it now, this is a Murlidharan kind of stat. He took 5 wickets in an innings in 5 out of 6 consecutive Test innings at home in Pakistan in that season. He took a five for 5 times in 6 consecutive innings, and in the sixth innings, he took 4 wickets in the innings. Like, just those are like crazy. Like, I cannot compute those now, And in those days, I remember like looking. I used to look for, because a lot of the cricket we wouldn't see live. I would just see like scorecards in the newspaper the next day, or I would hear about it on commentary, BBC radio play. And my expectation would be every game, every innings. My expectation would be that Waqar ne at least 4 या 5 wicket liye. And the crazy thing was that he would take those every time. And I was like, for the longest time, I thought if you're not taking 4 or 5 wickets in innings, then what kind of bowler even are you? Like, why are you even trying to bowl? Because this is what Waqar does, and this is what he did for the longest time. 180 wickets in 28 Test matches. Yeah, that's just it's insane. It's like an all-time standard record. And so this spell, which we we kind of veer away from. But I think that's the whole point, is that you kind of try and capture everything. I think this spell had everything of like the force, like the true force of nature that Waqar was in those first 4 or 5 years.
I think that I'm sorry to people, we are going to move away from this spell because I think there's two things I really want to discuss. The first one is that obviously for somebody like me, there was always this great dichotomy. Yeah, कि मतलब एक competition था हमेशा Waseem versus Waqar. In fact, I was
Mm.
like much older when I realized, like, for a lot of fans, the comparison was Imran versus Waseem, in
Mm.
terms of like the quote. But like for me, it was always these two. And so I wanted us to have a quick discussion. I'm going to throw out some famous duos. And we're going to see which one we think is Waseem and which one is Waqar. Okay.
Okay.
So this was actually a big concern for me in my teens. Junoon versus Vital Signs. Which one do you think is Waseem and which one do you think is Waqar?
Waqar is Junoon.
Yeah, I felt actually this was one of the most representative analogies because,
Yeah.
Junoon kind of had, particularly in the earlier pre-Sufi sound, was very much like Waqar, is just like the guitar is really going
Yeah.
at it.
Tangli.
Salman Ahmed had quit Vital. Yeah, he quit Vital Signs simply because he wanted to just go all out. Lohe Laheyat at Vital Signs did. And, Vital Signs created arguably more evergreen music that did not feel so dated, that had kind of a lot of, range to it,
Yeah,
which I thought was a great analogy.
they had that highbrow phase as well, right? When they were kind of influenced by Pink
Yeah,
Floyd and
yeah,
stuff like that, which is like
yeah,
the Waseem smart, intelligent kind of intellectualization of bowling, which Waseem
yeah.
represents.
So, okay, Cardi B and Nicki Minaj.
Dude, like, are you seriously expect? I don't even. I barely know their names. I have no idea of the
Then,
styles of music. But let me take a shot. I think Nicki Minaj must be Waqar.
well, it's interesting. It depends, I guess, how you, because like Cardi is the upstart card, like, which I guess Waqar you always put in the upstart one,
Oh, okay.
and Cardi
Yeah, I have no
kind
idea.
of was more of a hustler. Nikki had received like accolades for having more of the better craft or whatever. But I don't know. I Cardi B मैं इसलिए भी सोचा था क्योंकि Cardi B किसी भी stupid गाने में आप डाल देना, like the one that I really, it's like Maroon 5.
Yeah, yeah,
genetically
girls like you,
programmed to
girls like
hate their
you.
songs. Yeah, and then Cardi comes on and she just like fucking punches that song up to the stratosphere. I feel that was a Waqar thing.
So, oh, so
John
that's the
Lennon and
Wakar
Paul
thing. Okay,
McCartney.
that's the Wakar thing. Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Who's
Ooh,
Waqar, who's Waseem?
I think Waseem is Paul McCartney. No, maybe not, actually.
So I feel depends on how you want to look at it. If by and large Lennon is seen as a more kind of influential and philosophical figure, and
Hmm.
McCartney could guarantee hits. So in that way, I feel it's a Lennon Waseem McCartney Waqar, but I think you can flip that argument as well.
But you can, yeah, because Wakar, because Lennon was also like forever the. But you know what? This reminds me of a really interesting debate which I had with the late marhum Nadir Hassan, who, as you know, was like the biggest music guy out of all of us, really, and also a cricket freak. And I made the analogy of Lennon McCartney. I applied it to Mahela and Sangha in an article, and I think I equated Sangha with McCartney in that he was like the straighter, more establishment kind of guy, and Mahila was the slightly maverick Lennon one. And Nadir actually read the piece and tweeted me saying that you actually got it wrong because it was always the other way around. McCartney was the creative driving force, and he was actually much more of a maverick musician than Lennon was. So since then, I've never been comfortable applying any of these parallels to Lennon McCartney because I
Nice.
feel like Nadir Hassan had upended my entire world of like Beatles, Beatles music and stuff with that.
Oh, we'll stick with music. Lata Mangeshkar and Asha Bhosle.
Asha is definitely Waqar, I think. Right?
I feel this one fits well.
Yeah.
Like
Asha had
Lata
all the
has the
fun.
more iconic.
And she had
Yeah,
all the fun
yeah,
hits and
yeah.
all the like, just pe aapko uchal ke you need to do
Zyada
stuff.
छिछोरे.
That's Waqar.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, and finally, because you have to do it, biryani versus pulao, which I know both of us have controversial opinions on this. Which so you go for it.
My opinion simply is that I don't eat biryani and I have pulao with quinoa and not rice. That's my opinion on this whole thing. But okay, wait. No,
No,
you
I
know what?
feel I feel
I'm not well placed at all to answer this question. I will leave this to you.
I mean, I obviously the bias will come through, but like Wasim Akram as biryani, simply because pulao mein jo logon ko pasand bhi hai is that it's got that simplicity and it's got, you have to just nail a few ingredients
So is it like
completely rather
pulao is
than
a one
having.
trick pony? Is pulao a one trick pony
I would,
essentially?
I would, I would call it that, but at the same time, it's also maybe a virtuoso of the Yorker,
No. Well,
much like
peak
Waqar
Waqar, yeah,
is.
peak Waqar was a one trick pony, right? It was that ball that everyone kind of
Yeah,
went for. You
yeah.
know, like these comparisons. So I was like you. I was and remain and will forever be. I need a tattoo for it. A Waseem guy. I was Waseem all the way through, from start to finish. And so when Waqar first burst onto the scene, I was like, and we were talking. I was thinking about the right way to phrase this, but I felt like the in-law welcoming a bahu to the family, or I felt like that person, like with this mixture of course, goodwill and anticipation, but also like a sense of begrudging kind of कि यार ये मेरे offspring को मुझसे दूर करने वाली है. Like I felt I think it was that similar kind of feeling when Waqar came on. I was like, look, I love Pakistan cricket, and Pakistan cricket to me is Waseem Akram. And here comes Waqar, who is also Imran's favorite son now. Suddenly, like, एक जमाने में वसीम था, फिर अचानक से वकार भी हो गया इमरान का फेवरेट. आई वाज लाइक ये क्या बकवास हो रही है, तो केन एनेबल टाइप सीन चल रहा है यहाँ पे, ये क्या हो रहा है. I could see that Waqar would do amazing things for Pakistan, and together they would be good for Pakistan. I always felt, but जब शुरू में उसने जिस तरह से वो विकेट लेता था ना, I couldn't help myself, right? Like this spell, you can't help yourself but be pulled into Waqar's magnificence. You cannot, even if you didn't like him, you watch a spell like this, you cannot help but be like, aa jao, you are my lord and master and everything. But
Oh,
it was always with a sense of कि यार Waseem ने क्यों नहीं करा ये? Like, why didn't Waseem get these? Why hasn't Waseem got this? Waseem's got a cooler haircut, but still, you know, still there
yeah,
was
I
some.
want to ask. You brought up in-laws. Have you seen Made in Heaven? का नया season आया है.
I haven't seen the new season yet.
Because I was thinking there's another iconic duo there, Karan and Tara. And I feel like, okay, Waseem, like Tara, is somebody who's like, somebody who's just like, was straight away like, just has has like a lot of kind of grabs a lot of attention, and also has a lot of tricks up their sleeve, like they think things through, and they won't necessarily have the crazy long run up or whatever, right? And with Karan particularly, there is a self-destructive streak in there as well. And like that's a segue to, we've discussed like peak Waqar, Waqar's rise, and falana. um, but like the way Tara plays her moves with a lot more calculation, and Karan can sometimes be more self-destructive. The same way Wasim Akram has this like pretty typical fast bowler kind of action and run up and everything, and then he minimizes it to kind of allow himself to have a bit of that South Asian uncle kind of situation. Wakar keeps going until he breaks, right? And so, 96 quarterfinal versus India and Bangalore, which Waseem infamously sits out, is such a coda to what we're talking about today, क्योंकि उस मैच में अभी हम ये बात करते हैं कि क्रॉनिये की मजाल कैसे हुई कि वो वकार को चार्ज करके जगह बना के शॉट मार रहा है. एंड अप अंटिल देन देयर वाज वही बिलीफ था कि चाहे मतलब वही कि एज लॉन्ग एज 10 से ज्यादा रन पड़े, पाकिस्तानी टीम और पाकिस्तानी फास्ट बॉलिंग आपको मैच जिता देगी, और that was the match that like the myth for so at watching it at 13, like a childhood innocence completely died. And while I feel Wasim emerges from that and continues like that, in a sense Waqar then becomes a tribute act to Waqar Younis. कि वो उसके बाद से like he's smart enough to pick up wickets, and
Mm.
he's even though he has that big run up, he's like bowling a bit slower, and he's like जो early 2000s में इंग्लैंड में उसकी विकेटें, it's a lot closer to what modern fast bowling is कि आपके मतलब you're getting wickets because they're hitting it in the air, you're getting wickets because they're getting inside edges, you're getting wickets because they're making mistakes. It's not like what Waqar Younis used to be, where the batter could not do anything. Waqar Younis was going to blow up the stumps. And I feel the वकार यूनिस की अपनी जो लेगेसी है, क्योंकि उसके बाद वकार यूनिस जो एज अ कोच, दिस इज क्वाइट,
Mm.
it's been reported about him in multiple places, is that Waqar Younis, the coach, seems to be the person who's punishing the sins of younger Waqar. मतलब अब Waqar खुद भी, I've heard it like him say this कि with younger players when they start getting a bit style आ रहा है या भरम आ रहे
Mm.
हैं या ego आ रहा है या whatever आ रहा है, he's very quick to crack down on them because he feels that he ruined his career because he was too wayward, yeah, he was irresponsible, या party ज़्यादा कर रहा था, ये वो फलाना ढिमकाना, and almost take sort of guilt or regret का एक बहुत ज़्यादा, और वही old ex athletes all over the world में अक्सरियत में आपको ये यही मिलेगा. So it's not like Waqar is unique, but it is kind of interesting and a bit tragic that he had this huge peak, and then even his fall is a career that most people would give up their right arm
Mm.
for. It's an
Yeah.
amazing career still, but it's nothing like what Wakar used to be. And he seems to blame what ultimately seems to be that his body broke. Like, yeah, sure, he partied or whatever, and maybe they shouldn't have backstabbed each other and fixed matches and whatever, but that isn't necessarily a function of being a fun loving person. As you know, young Afridi and Shoaib Akhtar
Yeah.
forever have proven that fun guys don't have to be fixers. So that too, I feel like that's this other kind of tragic shadow that like the older I get, I appreciate Wakar even more for, because in that way there's more relatable. हम पिछले एपिसोड वसीम की बात करते हैं कि वसीम अकरम ने जो कुछ भी किया है, everyone still kind of loves him, and obviously,
Hmm.
he's aware he gets a lot of hate or whatever. But there's still consensus is Waseem Bhai great, you Falana Dhimkana. Waqar never had, I feel, that same level of protection from criticism, and because he's been a coach and he's been in the public eye in different ways for longer as well, or most importantly, I feel कि it's more relatable. कि वकार का कि आपकी जवानी में आप फुल मस्ती चल रही थी, आपको लग रहा था ब्रो यही लाइफ है और मैं जीता हूँ, and then एकदम से adulthood comes in and suddenly you're in debt and you don't have a job, and Waqar was never that bad, but that level of fall feels like that.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Is that अगर आप उसकी career post like 96 लें until 2003, because he still played until 2003, it's a more than respectable career for most fast bowlers, like who build up those numbers in ODIs or in Test matches. It's just that his early peak, and it's kind of like Ian Bishop at the same time had very similar figures as Waqar did in the first like 11, 12 tests of his career. And then, Bishop got injured, he had a back injury, Waqar had a back injury. But Waqar's peak was, like I said earlier, it was unlike almost anything we've seen in cricket, which is saying something. And, it's only against that standard that the later Waqar then becomes a less colorful, more ordinary figure. But at that time, and at that time, like uski swag jo thi or arrogance jo thi, wo acknowledged thi. I remember reading an article by another
Yeah.
late Agha Akbar in the Herald in like 1991 or 2, in which he likened I think he thought it was the greatest insult at the time, which is a sign of the times as well. He likened Waqar Younis to a boat basin dwelling chichora with swinging a key ring around his finger and stuff. And that, I think, Agha Akbar thought was the greatest insult he could give to any human being, was that you would be dwelling away the night at boat basin with a key ring. गाड़ी की चाबी आप ऐसे घुमा रहे हैं अपनी उंगली में. But that captured, I think, the era of Waqar, and then he was seen as like one of the main guys in the rebellion against Waseem, like he backstabbed Waseem or whatever. And the, I was reading the other day, just kind of looking up these spells and looking at that time. But एक पुराना वसीम का इंटरव्यू है इंडियन मैगजीन में स्पोर्ट्स स्टार में 94, soon after he got like kicked out as captain. और लंबा इंटरव्यू, उसमें इंटरव्यू पूछता है कि एंड कैन यू टेल अस अबाउट व्हाट इट्स like bowling with Waqar Younis, like he's such a explosive fast bowler, he's just come onto the scene, what's it like bowling with him. और आंसर वसीम का जो है, पूरे इंटरव्यू में उसने लंबे लंबे आंसर्स दिए हैं, सही ना, like 3-4 पैरास लॉन्ग. इसका आंसर इट्स फन. And I feel like those 2 words or 3 words with contractions, like they capture completely. I can imagine how Waseem must have said it. He's like, it's fun, and move on. I feel like it captures the rivalry so well in there. But, just like Waqar, what happened with his back was like tragic. Was absolutely tragic, because in those days, आपको इतना अंदाजा भी नहीं था कि किस तरह से आप था थोड़ा बहुत. But for him to miss the World Cup, for example, imagine like just imagine what that does to you as a human
Yeah.
being, as an
Yes.
athlete,
Yes.
when you are the hottest thing on the planet, like literally bar none, you are the hottest thing on the planet, on the cricket planet. Your team is shit hot, and you're going to a World Cup, and you miss that tournament. And initially, you maybe see them, you see them struggle and stuff, or हाँ ठीक है जो we are bakwas team hai. And then you see them win, and you're like, damn man, I should have been there, I would have been there, but for this. And so I think Waqar himself has said that when the team came back to Pakistan and he was at the airport, he couldn't stop crying. And that emotion, the crying, like I've always wondered like how much of it would have been just regret, pure regret. There must have been some happiness, because these are his teammates and Pakistan is one. But us बेचारे में कितनी regret होगी that he missed that tournament. It's like Maradona missing the 86 World Cup. It's that
Yeah.
level of
Yeah. Yeah.
it's that level of impact. Maradona, Messi missing, well, I guess this World Cup was really late anyway in Messi's career, but peak Messi missing like a Champions League final or something. And that
I
kind
think
of
there's a Didier Drogba like lost to AFCON finals and then they won when he retired or something like that.
Yes, exactly. That kind of thing. And I think it adds to the, like you were saying, it adds to the strangely, for such a otherworldly superstar that he was, it adds to the very human feel of Waqar. It adds to, and his coaching later on and his attitudes later on, I guess, added to it. But this, I always felt like him missing that tournament really like kind of drove home like the hubris of being what he was and being that, having that swag, and then suddenly for it to go, man, that must take something. It's remarkable that he's still a fairly kind of level-headed human being, father of 3 kids or whatever, living a fairly contented life in Australia and whatnot. And whenever you talk to him about the game, he's still like lovely. He gives you time. He talks about stuff, and he's always willing to talk about bowling and stuff and fast bowlers. But कितना आपको ये काटता होगा यार, when that was the sole reason for your existence for a while and you missed it. Oof, it must be terrible. It must be a terrible feeling.
Yeah, and in fact, I think I think this is a good way to kind of end it, because like, you know, हम बैठ के, and someone like Waqar Younis is like central to me watching cricket and Pakistan cricket my whole life and talking about it, writing about it, etc. And matlab, I've made fun of Waqar on this past hour already. I've said flippant things about all these players, but I think I try and remind myself this is कि there's two things we've now talked about. A, कि आप इतने दुनिया भर में most hyped superstar हो and you miss a World Cup due to an injury that'll eventually rob you of your peak within a few years anyways, and your team goes on to win the World Cup and it changes all their lives, and you're forever edited out of history. That's one thing. And just the other end of that extreme, like when you've won the match and you had to go through this to this place of such extreme viscerality कि आपकी मतलब आंखें सूज के फटने वाली. I think those kind of emotions, like, it's very important to remember that we never experience anything remotely like that in the context of our job, like
Yeah.
in maybe in the context of most of our lives, but particularly doing this as a living. It's one thing to maybe have a hobby mein skydiving kar rahe hain or whatever. No, like this is your living. You're doing it in front of millions of people with millions of opinions, and the highs can be so crazy that literally your body is about to explode, and the lows are so crazy that we can't even imagine living a settled life afterwards. Magar that's exactly what these athletes do, and I think there's something really incredible about what they experience in that sense, um, because that is something that we sometimes take for granted in the fact, because sports gives us so much meaning that we completely ignore what that experience is like for the people who are creating that meaning for us. And Waqar
Yeah.
Younis really goes through the whole spectrum of experiences.
And I just want to add, like, to end this, really, the quote, I'm just looking at it now because it's in the book. When I spoke to him, he was saying that, and I was saying that how this is such an overwhelming moment, that spell, it must have been such an overwhelming spell and a moment for you. And he said that, the eye thing happened and he did that. But then he waited for a little bit, and then he said, that's what I miss about cricket. Like, I don't remember the wins, the losses, the tournaments, the spats, the fixing. I don't remember any of that so much unless I have to. But that feeling, like that feeling that I had, just imagine like that feeling that I had for that half an hour in a life of 50 plus years. You're looking back to this half an hour of such an extreme high. You're like, that's what I miss. He says, I don't miss bowling. I don't miss going out on the field. I don't miss watching cricket. But that feeling I had, and the feeling, and I think this is it. The feeling that he had then was that he was the master of the goddamn universe, because at that time he really was.
And that is where the episode will end, so that at least for these few hours, Waqar Younis remains master of the universe. I was Amar Naqvi. That was Usman Samyuddin. Please keep watching, sharing, listening, subscribing, all that bullshit. We hope to be back very soon. Till then, bye bye.
एकदम इन्होंने वक्त बदल दिया, जज्बात बदल दिए, जिंदगी बदल दी. मारो मुझे, मारो मारो मुझे, मारो. Asking for it. मादर के बच्चे